Part 1, Chapter 4 of Passing. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Elizabeth Klett. Passing by Nella Larsen. Part 1, Chapter 4. The next morning, the day of her departure for New York, had brought a letter, which at first glance she had instinctively known came from Clare Kendry, though she couldn't remember ever having had a letter from her before. Ripping it open and looking at the signature, she saw that she had been right in her guess. She wouldn't, she told herself, read it. She hadn't the time. And besides, she had no wish to be reminded of the afternoon before. As it was, she felt none too fresh for her journey. She had had a wretched night. And all because of Clare's innate lack of consideration for the feelings of others. But she did read it. After father and friends had waved good-bye, and she was being hurled eastward, she became possessed of an uncontrollable curiosity to see what Clare had said about yesterday. For what, she asked, as she took it out of her bag and opened it, what could anyone say about a thing like that? Clare Kendry had said: "'Reen, dear, however am I to thank you for your visit? I know you were feeling that under the circumstances I ought not to have asked you to come, or rather, insisted. But if you could know how glad, how excitingly happy I was to meet you, and how I ached to see more of you, to see everybody and couldn't, you would understand my wanting to see you again, and maybe forgive me a little. My love to you always, and always to your dear father, and all my poor thanks. Clare." And there was a postscript that said: "It may be, Reen dear, it may just be that, after all, your way may be the wiser and infinitely happier one. I'm not sure just now, at least not so sure as I have been. C." But the letter hadn't conciliated Irene. Her indignation was not lessened by Clare's flattering reference to her wiseness. As if, she thought wrathfully, anything could take away the humiliation, or any part of it, of what she had gone through yesterday afternoon for Clare Kendry. With an unusual methodicalness she tore the offending letter into tiny ragged squares that fluttered down and made a small heap in her black crepe de chine lap. The destruction completed, she gathered them up, rose, and moved to the train's end. Standing there, she dropped them over the railing and watched them scatter, on tracks, on cinders, on forlorn grass, in rills of dirty water. And that, she told herself, was that. The chances were 1 in a million that she would ever again lay eyes on Clare Kendry. If, however, that millionth chance should turn up, she had only to turn away her eyes, to refuse her recognition. She dropped Clare out of her mind and turned her thoughts to her own affairs, to home, to the boys, to Brian. Brian, who in the morning would be waiting for her in the great clamorous station. She hoped that he had been comfortable and not too lonely without her and the boys. Not so lonely that old, queer, unhappy restlessness had begun again with him, that craving for some place strange and different, which at the beginning of her marriage she had had to make such strenuous efforts to repress, and which yet faintly alarmed her, though it now sprang up at gradually lessening intervals. End of Chapter 4. End of Part 1.